Ngalakin Khadijan Nyunga Boja.
Hello and welcome. My name's Rebecca Fowenyo and I'm Director of the Juris Doctor. I'd like to talk to you a bit today about the JD and what the course involves. I'll also give you an overview for the varying entry pathways into the JD. The University of Western Australia acknowledges that its campus is situated on Noongar land and that Noongar people remain the spiritual and cultural custodians of their land and continue to practice their values, languages, beliefs and knowledge. Firstly, today I'll talk a little bit about the Juris Doctor or the JD, and I'll take you through our model and why you might consider the UWA JD. We'll run through the course structure and the option units, and then I'll work through the various entry pathways and talk briefly about each of the requirements for the different pathways into the JD. About the Juris Doctor. The Juris Doctor or the JD is our flagship qualifying degree. Graduates can apply for admission as a lawyer with the Legal Practice Board of WA. Law students can apply for membership of the Law Society of WA whilst still at university. The course runs for 3 years if you choose to study full-time. There are also part-time options available which can take up to 9 years. As I've said already, the JD is accredited by the Legal Practice Board of WA. It's also recognised in China, Malaysia and Singapore. The time commitment for the JD is approximately 40 hours per week over 12 weeks, and that includes contact hours, personal study time and examinations. How does the JD model work? The Juris Doctor is a postgraduate degree. So what that means is that you first need to complete your 3-year undergraduate degree, and then on conclusion of that, you enrol in the postgraduate Juris Doctor. At the end of the whole period of both degrees, you'll be qualified to practice law and you will have 2 degrees under your belt. This means that we can teach the Juris Doctor at the postgraduate level and really provide challenging skills and rigour in the way that we teach and the way that you learn. So why might you consider the UWA JD? You can learn here from the very best of the legal profession and award-winning academics recognised nationally for excellence in teaching and research. We really do care about our teaching and we work hard to try and design the best law program for you that we can deliver. So this includes staying on top of curriculum innovation and also working hard on our materials, on our in-classroom experience for our JD students. As part of that, we have an emphasis on practical and professional skill building and an inquiry approach to learning. And this is to produce graduates who can distinguish themselves in the workforce. We do this in a number of ways. Partly it's embedded throughout our units. Partly also we have some core units which are taught in intensive mode. What I mean by this is a 2-week period at the start of semester 1, so immediately before semester 1 commences, when you spend 2 weeks intensively learning a whole core unit. What that does is it really enables us to workshop skills and to build and develop those practical skills in a way that otherwise might be more difficult. You'll also be able to study here with high-achieving students in an inclusive environment and build lifelong friendships with a diverse and vibrant cohort of future leaders. We have really inspiring and inspired students here and it's an opportunity to make friends and lifelong friends. The student body is very active and in particular there's a law student society called the Blackstone Society. They run a number of competitions and they're very active in organising social events, careers information and a range of other activities as well. We also have a fairly close relationship between students and staff, which makes the learning and teaching experience enjoyable for all of us, I think. We're pleased to say that we have very high graduate employment rates and that rate was over 93% for our 2019 graduating cohort. We also have comprehensive and integrated wellbeing and professionalism programs. And this starts from the beginning of the JD and runs all the way through. We think that wellbeing is really important, both during your time studying law with us, and also we think it's important to equip you with skills that you can take into practice to help with your future wellbeing. As part of it, I'd like you to meet Tilly, our Juris Doctor. She is our law school therapy dog. She's very cute, very soft, very friendly and very cuddly, and you can book in time with her to take her for walks, to sit and pat her and cuddle her. And so if you do enter into the JD, we hope at some point you will make sure that you get to meet up with Tilly, certainly our most popular member of staff. We also try to be and remain at the forefront of innovation in legal education, and this is with initiatives such as Indigenisation of the JD curriculum. This is an Australia First initiative that seeks to embed Indigenous knowledge, experience and laws across the JD. We also introduce our students to cutting-edge technological developments in the law and in the provision of legal services. This includes, for example, developments in artificial intelligence and an attempt to equip students for the way that you'll be working in the workforce when you graduate. So can you use artificial intelligence? Are you aware of the way that practice is changing? And we really want to equip our students to be abreast of that. We also offer a range of progressive and interesting elective option units. I'll talk more about those in a minute or two. We believe that work integrated learning is really important to give you a taste of what to expect once you've graduated, and also to develop the skills that you'll need to contribute effectively and confidently from your very first day in the workforce. So one of our offerings here is a legal internship unit. This involves a 12-week legal placement. Students spend 1 day a week in a legal environment, and that ranges from private practice in-house to, private practice or in-house. It could also include a placement at a government body, at an NGO, or with a barrister, for example. We have a clinical legal education unit, which is situated in the UWA Mediation Clinic, and we also offer a legal aptitude elective. This involves students working in teams with clients and people from industry to design legal apps that will help with their business. We offer a range of mooting competitions, client interview competitions, and Australia's first university law journal. So quite a few opportunities there to develop your skills and also to focus on work integrated learning. I thought it might be helpful to briefly take you through the JD course structure. As I said earlier, the JD runs for 3 years full time. Each semester of study involves 4 units if you take the JD full time. The units in yellow are the units that are taught in intensive mode. So each year of the JD, there is 1 core unit which is taught intensively over 2 weeks before the first semester study begins. What that means is that we have a 2-week period when the whole cohort is here on campus together, and campus is otherwise relatively quiet. So it's actually a really lovely time to bond with your cohort, especially in first year, to make friends early on and to work intensively and focus on law and on developing those legal skills. This intensive structure also means that your load is lightened for first semester because you have most of your study for 1 core unit already out the way before the rest of the units commence. You'll see as well, looking at this chart, that there are a number of option units. In second year you can choose 2 option units, and in final year you can choose 5 option units. So that really lets you progress your own interests and decide what you might like to study. In terms of our option unit offerings, I put up on this slide here our option units on offer in 2020. You can see that we cover quite a range. So in terms of practical units, you might be interested in units like forensic advocacy, negotiation and mediation, advanced evidence and proof, or the legal aptitude unit I was already talking about. We require all students to undertake 1 international focused option units. And you can see that there's quite a range there also. These are the units in the middle column. So you might be interested in international environmental law, comparative law, WTO law, or one of our recent additions is a unit on satellites, drones and space law. And then in the column on the right here, you can see there's a range of other option units that we offer as well, and this will allow you to pursue an area of interest like intellectual property, health law and policy. There's an advanced legal research possibility for some students in the final year, mergers and acquisitions, and a number of other units to choose from. I'd like to move on now to talk about our JD entry pathways. And you can see from this slide that we offer 5 main entry pathways. They are a little different, and the purpose of this is to encourage diversity within our school and to provide different pathways depending on what your background is and where you're at in life at the point when you decide you would like to study the JD. I'll start by talking about the direct pathway entry. This is an option that you might be considering if you're currently in Year 12 or soon to complete your secondary schooling. This pathway requires an ATR of, at the moment, minimum ATR of 96, and then you may be offered a place in the JD pursuant to what we call our direct pathway. What that means is that you receive your direct pathway offer into the JD at the end of your school studies. You complete a 3-year bachelor's degree, and then if you satisfy certain requirements across that degree, you have a guaranteed place in the Juris Doctor on conclusion of that first degree. So what you would be looking for there is an ATR of 96 or above, and then completing your first degree with the equivalent of a GPA or grade point average of at least 5.5 out of 7 across all completed tertiary studies. And then at the end of your bachelor's degree plus your postgraduate Juris Doctor degree, you'll be qualified to become a lawyer. If you miss out on direct pathway in Year 12, or if you don't decide until later that it's the JD that you would really like to study, there's an option to transfer into a direct pathway in the course of your first undergraduate degree. How does this work? Students who've completed, UWA students, who have completed 48 points in their undergraduate degree at UWA, so that's equivalent to 1 year full-time, with a minimum GPA of 6, can apply to be considered for a direct pathway into the Juris Doctor. I put a note there that applications should be submitted before the official release of results for the semester when you expect to complete your 48 points. And applications from second and third year students may be considered, but if you apply after completing more than 48 points, you must also have a current GPA of at least 6. And students in the final semester of their undergraduate degree cannot apply for a direct pathway. That is largely because those students would be looking at entry via the standard pathway, which I'll talk about now. So the standard pathway, or what I've called here general admission, requires applicants to have a bachelor's degree or an equivalent qualification as recognised by UWA, and to have completed that degree with the equivalent of UWA weighted average mark, or WAM, of at least 65%, or the equivalent of UWA grade point average, or GPA, of at least 5.5. We offer a number of other pathways too, and one of these is the Indigenous entry pathway. To be eligible for admission via this pathway, an Indigenous applicant must have met the general admission requirements I spoke about on the previous slide, or must have a bachelor's degree via the UWA Indigenous direct pathway and the equivalent of a UWA weighted average mark of at least 60%, or the equivalent of a UWA GPA of at least 5. Or the third possibility is to have completed a bachelor's degree or an equivalent qualification as recognised by UWA and a School of Indigenous Studies law admission test and interview. To be considered via the Equity and Diversity pathway, an applicant must have held a protection, refugee or humanitarian visa within 7 years prior to applying for admission to the JD, or experience significant personal, medical, social, educational, cultural or financial disadvantage or hardship, including any disadvantage or hardship resulting from the applicant's sexual orientation or gender identity that has had an effect on their prior academic studies. So either of those two, and a bachelor's degree or equivalent qualification as recognised by UWA, and the equivalent of a UWA WAM of at least 60% or a GPA of at least 5. If you are a mature age applicant, you might be interested in our alternative experience pathway. In order to be eligible or to be considered for admission via this pathway, you need to have a bachelor's degree or an equivalent qualification as recognised by UWA. You need to demonstrate competency for legal studies derived from a minimum of 5 years unpaid or paid work, study or other experience since completion of the undergrad degree. and completed the equivalent of 1 year full-time in a UWA undergraduate course with a minimum WAM of 65 or GPA of 5.5, and that needs to have been undertaken within the past 2 years. Alternatively, the other possibility for this pathway is to have a bachelor's degree or equivalent as recognised by UWA, and the equivalent of a UWA WAM of 60% or GPA of at least 5, and demonstrate capacity for legal studies derived from a minimum of 5 years unpaid or paid work, study or other experience since completion of your first undergrad degree, and a personal statement and an interview. So there are a number of different pathways into the JD. If you have already embarked on studies elsewhere and you are interested in transferring to the Juris Doctor, there is a transfer possibility. And to be considered for transfer, an applicant must have at a minimum completed the equivalent of a full semester of the UWA JD at an Australian university and achieved the equivalent of a UWA WAM of at least 60% in that JD course.